The year is 1942. The ocean is vast, but it is also a highway, a lifeline. For Great Britain, that lifeline stretches thousands of miles, across the treacherous Atlantic, around the coast of Africa, bringing vital supplies to a nation under siege. But beneath the waves, a silent predator hunts. Its commander, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, believes he can sever this lifeline, starve an empire into submission, and alter the course of the war. He envisions a relentless, brutal campaign. But how does one man, with a relatively small fleet, hope to dominate such an immense expanse of ocean, and what price will be paid in the cold, dark depths? Born on September 16, 1891, in Grunau near Berlin, Germany, Karl Donitz enters the Imperial German Navy in 1910. He is a man of the sea, destined for a naval career. During the First World War, he distinguishes himself as a submarine officer, commanding 1st UC-25 and later UB-68 in the Mediterranean. His time as a U-boat captain ends abruptly in October 1918 when technical malfunctions force him to surface UB-68 near Malta. Rather than allow his U-boat to fall into enemy hands, Karl Donitz scuttles the vessel and surrenders to British forces, spending the remainder of the war as a prisoner. After his release in 1919, Karl Donitz remains in the drastically reduced German Navy, a service severely constrained by the Treaty of Versailles, which explicitly forbids Germany from possessing submarines. For the next 15 years, he serves on surface warships, but his mind constantly returns to the potential of underwater warfare. In 1935, with the Anglo-German naval agreement loosening restrictions, Admiral Erich Raeder selects Karl Donitz to secretly reconstitute Germany's submarine force. By the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, Karl Donitz is the commander of U-boats, or Befehlshaber der Unterseeboot, BDU, a rear admiral leading a fleet far smaller than he believes necessary. He possesses only 57 U-boats, with a mere 27 capable of reaching the Atlantic from their German bases. His vision is clear: a wolfpack strategy, where groups of U-boats, rather than operating independently, converge to overwhelm Allied convoys. He believes this tactic, born from his own World War I experiences in the Mediterranean, offers the only path to victory against the numerically superior Allied navies. The vastness of the Atlantic, the sheer volume of Allied shipping, and the nascent, yet growing, Allied anti-submarine capabilities stand as immense hurdles before him. His U-boats are Germany's primary weapon in the Battle of the Atlantic, a struggle for economic survival that will extend far beyond the North Atlantic, reaching deep into the waters off the African continent. The challenges facing Karl Donitz and his U-boat arm are monumental from the very beginning. The Treaty of Versailles severely restricts Germany's naval rearmament, prioritizing land and air forces. From 1933 to 1936, the German Navy receives only 13% of the total armament expenditure. U-boat production remains low, with only 14 submarines built in 1935, 21 in 1936, a mere 1 in 1937, 9 in 1938, and 18 in 1939. This limited fleet is a stark contrast to Donitz's strategic requirement of at least 300 operational U-boats to effectively implement his wolfpack tactics against British convoys. Beyond numerical inferiority, early U-boat operations are plagued by technical issues. Torpedo failures are a persistent and frustrating problem for commanders during convoy attacks. These malfunctions include pistols detonating prematurely, detonating at the end of their run without hitting the target, or failing to detonate entirely, even when passing directly beneath a ship. Investigations later reveal that torpedoes often run deeper than their set depth. This unreliability costs the U-boat arm significant successes in the early years of the war. The Allies, meanwhile, are not static. While slow to adopt it, the convoy system, where merchant ships sail in large, escorted groups, proves to be a critical defensive measure. This system reduces the time a submarine can devote to each target and concentrates escorts, making individual attacks far more perilous. Early radar systems, such as the Type 286M and Type 286P, begin to appear on escort ships by early 1941, significantly impacting the U-boat's preferred tactic of attacking on the surface at night. High-frequency direction finding, HF, DF, or HUF-DUF, also becomes a potent tool, allowing Allied escorts to pinpoint U-boat radio transmissions and close in on their positions. Karl Donitz faces skepticism from within his own high command. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, the commander-in-chief of the Kriegsmarine until 1943, often disputes the value of attacking westward convoys with empty sea cargo holds. The German rearmament program prioritizes surface fleet construction and land warfare, leaving Dönitz constantly struggling for resources and for his strategic vision to be fully embraced. His U-boats are a vital weapon, but they are consistently rated behind the Army and Air Force in German armament priorities. No one believes it is truly possible to defeat Britain from beneath the waves, especially with such limited resources. They are about to be proven catastrophically wrong. The Battle of the Atlantic rages, a brutal war of attrition that extends far beyond the familiar waters of the North Atlantic. Karl Donitz, from his command center, directs his U-boats across vast oceanic distances, including into the South Atlantic and the Mediterranean, where they threaten the vital Allied supply lines to Africa. In September 1941, Dönitz dispatches a force of U-boats to operate principally off the West African coast. The first wave of 4 boats, sent in late August and early September, achieves limited success. However, a subsequent wave of 4 U-boats, departing in mid-September, proves more effective, attacking convoy SL-87 and sinking 6 ships. During this action, U-68, commanded by Korvettenkapitän Karl Friedrich Merton, fires most of its torpedoes, many of which malfunction, leaving it low on ordnance. Another U-boat, U-67, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Gunther Müller-Stockheim, has a crewman requiring urgent medical attention. Dönitz orders U-67 and U-68 to rendezvous with U-111, a first-wave boat returning to base, in Tarrafal Bay, Cape Verde. This rendezvous, on September 27–28, 1941, becomes a tense, inconclusive engagement when the British submarine HMS Clyde, alerted by decrypted German Enigma messages, attempts to intercept them. The early successes, despite torpedo issues, demonstrate the potential for U-boat operations in these distant waters. In October and November 1941, U-68 manages to sink both the 5,090-ton Hazeltide and the 5,306-ton Bradford City off the coast of southwest Africa, proving that single U-boats can indeed reach and attack shipping in these remote areas. However, Dönitz generally disfavors sending individual U-boats to operate off the southern African coast, believing their independent actions would alert the Allies and lead to stringent anti-submarine measures without yielding sufficient sinking results to justify the long deployment. As 1942 progresses, the strategic landscape shifts. Allied anti-submarine warfare (ASW) measures, particularly in the North Atlantic and off the American coast, become increasingly effective. Long-range air patrols and an expanding convoy network make U-boat operations there less profitable. Dönitz recognizes this decline in sinking results, and, in meetings with Hitler in August and September 1942, proposes a new direction. He argues that while the North Atlantic is becoming too dangerous, the waters off Cape Town present virgin territory, where his U-boats could achieve swift and considerable success. He estimates that Type IXC U-boats would need to travel nearly 9,600 kilometers to reach this area, requiring submarine tankers for refueling en route. Hitler, though not keen on new long-range bombers, strongly endorses the construction of new U-boats with high underwater speed. In October 1942, Dönitz launches Operation Icebar, Polar Bear, a significant offensive targeting the shipping lanes off the South African coast. This group comprises 4 Type 9 U-boats and a fueling vessel. Between October 7 and December 14, 1942, These U-boats, along with one Italian submarine, achieved devastating results. They sink 53 merchantmen, totaling 314,419 tons of shipping, for the loss of only one U-boat. This translates to an approximate average of 5.88 merchant vessels sunk per U-boat. U-504, part of the Icebar Group, detaches and moves north, joining 3 other U-cruisers. This derivative operation harasses the Natal coast and the Mozambique Channel from October 31 to December 4, sinking 10 vessels off Natal alone, including the converted freighter Nova Scotia. The sinking of the Nova Scotia results in the largest loss of life recorded in South African waters during the war. The success of Operation Icebar proves to the German Naval High Command that operations as far south as the South African coast are not only possible but highly effective. This leads to 2 further German submarine offensives in South African waters during the war, along with opportunistic attacks by U-boats en route to the Far East. November 8, 1942. The Allies launch Operation Torch, the invasion of French North Africa. This massive undertaking sees 107,000 ground troops, 350 warships, and 500 transports moving towards the coasts of Morocco and Algiers. From the Allied perspective, the sheer scale of the operation should afford some protection, but the vulnerability of such a vast armada is also a constant concern. British and American commanders are aware of the U-boat threat in the Atlantic and Mediterranean but are under the impression that their intelligence and escort forces are sufficient. They believe their initial landings will achieve surprise, allowing them to establish beachheads before a concentrated enemy response can materialize. However, Karl Donitz is already reacting. 7 U-boats from the Atlantic Force receive orders to break through the heavily guarded Strait of Gibraltar and proceed to the North African coast. Additionally, 9 Mediterranean U-boats are deployed to the same region. In total, 19 U-boats are positioned between the Balearic Islands and Algiers, while the Italian Navy contributes 21 submarines east of Algiers. On November 7, 5 German submarines make contact with the British invasion forces, but all their initial attacks miss their targets. The next day, most of these U-boats are operating near Bougie and fail to intercept the main landings at Algiers. The Allies, unaware of the full extent of the U-boat deployment or their initial struggles, perceive these early hours as a successful evasion of major submarine attacks, reinforcing their confidence in their intelligence and escort capabilities. They are wrong. The U-boat threat, though initially dispersed, quickly materializes. On November 11, 1942, 4 merchant vessels and 1 destroyer are sunk while riding at anchor off Fedala, near Casablanca, by what appears to be a mass U-boat attack. U-130 alone sinks 3 large transports at the Fedala anchorage, forcing the port to close and rerouting ships to Casablanca. A second wave of 14 U-boats is then sent to the area west of Gibraltar, attempting to block all traffic in and out of the straits. They achieve notable successes, sinking the escort carrier HMS Avenger and the destroyer tender HMS Hecla, both with significant loss of life. In the Mediterranean and Atlantic theaters combined, the Germans lose 8 U-boats, and the Italians lose 2, during the Operation Torch period. Between November 8 and 14, German bomber and torpedo aircraft also attack ships along the North African coast. The Allied invasion of North Africa, while ultimately successful, comes at a cost, demonstrating the pervasive reach of Dönitz's U-boat arm, even when operating under immense pressure and against overwhelming numerical superiority. If you had been an Allied convoy commander in November 1942, knowing the U-boat threat was omnipresent but often unseen, how would you have balanced the urgency of delivering supplies with the imperative to protect your men and ships? Tell me in the comments. The U-boat campaign in the Mediterranean continues into 1943. Malta, a critical British base, remains strategically located near Axis supply routes from Europe to North Africa. Axis convoys suffer severe losses, threatening their army's fighting ability in North Africa, while the Allies manage to keep their own forces supplied. Dönitz, despite his initial reluctance, recognizes the strategic importance of the Mediterranean. Natural bottlenecks like the Straits of Gibraltar are prime hunting grounds. Some 60 German U-boats make the hazardous passage into the Mediterranean from 1941, though only one will complete the journey both ways. In February 1943, U-77 sinks the 6,699-ton Empire Banner and the 7,043-ton Empire Webster from convoy KMS-8. U-81 sinks the 2,012-ton Garland on November 10, 1942, and the 6,487-ton Marin on November 13, 1942. U-73 damages the 7,453-ton Lalande on November 14, 1942, and sinks the Liberty ship Arthur Middleton from convoy UGS-3 on January 1, 1943. These individual successes, though costly for the Allies, are becoming harder to achieve as Allied ASW improves. Allied armies advancing through North Africa and Sicily establish a network of airfields, increasing the frequency of U-boat detection by aircraft. The 29th Flotilla, initially based at La Spezia and later moving to Toulon on August 1, 1943, focuses on Western Mediterranean convoys supplying Allied troops. However, 3 U-boats are maintained at Salamis to patrol the Eastern Mediterranean, forcing the Allies to disperse their ASW efforts. Despite these efforts, 1943 marks the effective end of the Battle of the Mediterranean for U-boats, as combined Anglo-American strength expels the Axis from North Africa. Without supply lines to Africa to defend, the Axis focus shifts to repelling Allied invasions in Italy. Overall, U-boats account for nearly 450,000 tons of shipping sunk in the Mediterranean, comprising 95 vessels. However, 62 U-boats are lost. In the campaign, by mid-1943, the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic turns decisively against the U-boats. The Allies enhance their anti-submarine warfare capabilities significantly. Radar-equipped long-range aircraft, operating from new escort carriers, become a game-changer. These aircraft can spot surfaced U-boats from great distances and attack them with depth charges. The air gap in the mid-Atlantic, once a safe haven for wolfpacks, is progressively closed. Support groups of escort ships, free from the obligation to remain with convoys, can now hunt submerged U-boats until their batteries and air supplies are exhausted, forcing them to surface. Ultra-intelligence, derived from decrypted German Enigma messages, plays an increasingly critical role. While not always providing real-time information, and with periods of blackout, when German codes are unreadable, Ultra often allows Allied convoys to be rerouted away from known U-boat patrol lines. In one instance, decrypted messages reveal a heavy concentration of German submarines north of the Azores. A major convoy of aviation fuel tankers from Trinidad to the Mediterranean is rerouted south. Tragically, the convoy commander, needing to refuel escorts and preferring better weather, disregards instructions and sails north, directly into the U-boat concentration. Only 2 tankers reach port. Dönitz, despite his belief in the security of the Enigma system, sometimes questions German intelligence when convoys are diverted, but is assured that the system is impenetrable. Which side of this evolving technological battle do you think held the true advantage in the early stages, and why? Tell me in the comments. The increasing effectiveness of Allied ASW measures leads to devastating losses for the U-boat arm. May 1943 becomes known as Black May, a catastrophic month for Dönitz's command, with 41 U-boats lost in the North Atlantic. This rate of loss is unsustainable. Dönitz, who by January 1943 has been promoted to Grand Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the entire German Navy, while retaining his command of the U-boat fleet, is forced to reassess his strategy. From his headquarters, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz receives daily reports of mounting losses. He knows the U-boats are struggling. On May 24, 1943, a somber order is transmitted to all U-boats in the North Atlantic. All boats are to proceed to new operational areas. This marks a temporary, but significant, withdrawal from the primary North Atlantic convoy routes. It is a strategic retreat, a recognition that the balance of power in the mid-Atlantic has shifted decisively. The air gaps are now covered, and attempts by U-boats to surface for attacks are thwarted with increasing frequency. However, Dönitz is a man of relentless determination. He is convinced that the U-boat remains Germany's most potent weapon against Allied shipping. He pushes for the development of new, more advanced U-boat types, particularly those with higher submerged speeds, to counter the Allied technological advantage. He also turns his attention once more to distant waters, where Allied ASW might be less concentrated. In March and April 1943, Dönitz directs U-boat command to mount a new offensive in the Indian Ocean, designating 7 U-cruisers for the task: U-198, U-196, U-195, U-197, U-181, U-177, and U-178. Allied code breakers, however, provide details about this 7-boat foray, and the Admiralty notifies the relevant naval commands. On May 4, the War Diary of the British South Atlantic Command records, "In view of the approaching U-boat threat, complete convoy system round South Africa coast was reintroduced. All independent sailings were suspended except fast ships. Despite the intensified ASW measures, some successes are still achieved. Captain-Lieutenant Hans Ibekin in U-178 sinks the troopship Duchess of Atholl en route to the Cape. U-198, under Captain-Lieutenant Burkhard Husinger Waldig, sinks the South African freighter Columbine off Cape Town before proceeding into the Mozambique Channel, where he sinks 3 British freighters: Director, Empire City and Empire Day. But the cost is high. Of the 7 U-cruisers designated for this Indian Ocean offensive, 2 are lost, U-197 is sunk, and U-195 aborts its mission. The operations off the coast of Africa are not without severe risks for the U-boat crews. The journey alone is arduous, requiring long periods at sea and often refueling from vulnerable submarine tankers. Patrols in the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean expose U-boats to unique challenges, including the vast distances and the eventual tightening of Allied air and surface patrols even in these remote areas. For instance, U-68 is eventually sunk in April 1944, bound for the Caribbean, with the loss of all 56 crew members, including its commander, Albert Lausimus. U-160 is sunk by a Fido torpedo in July 1943, 400 kilometers south of the Azores, with all 54 hands, including Commander Gerd Palmer-Esch. Karl Donitz's command is marked by a stark, uncompromising approach to warfare. Following the Laconia incident in September 1942, where a U-boat commander attempted to rescue survivors of a torpedoed troopship, only to be attacked by an American bomber, Dönitz issues a chilling order. No attempt of any kind must be made at rescuing members of ships sunk, and this includes picking up persons in the water and putting them in lifeboats, righting capsized lifeboats, and handing over food and water. Rescue runs counter to the most primitive demands of warfare for the destruction of enemy ships and crews. Be hard. Remember that the enemy has no regard for women and children when he bombs German cities. This order, born of the brutal realities of submarine warfare and the perceived Allied disregard for U-boat crews, solidifies the grim nature of the Battle of the Atlantic under his command. What does it tell you about a man that he made that choice with everything to lose, and what are the moral implications of such a command in the unforgiving theater of war? Tell me in the comments. The overall effectiveness of the U-boat arm in 1942, despite some successes in specific areas like off South Africa, actually sees a decline in the effectiveness of individual boats compared to 1940. This is a direct consequence of the improving Allied defenses and the increasing number of U-boats at sea, which makes it harder for them to achieve the same individual sinking rates. By the end of 1943, the U-boat forays to the Indian Ocean and the South Atlantic are no longer considered a priority. The focus shifts back to the North Atlantic, where the battle continues with renewed ferocity, but the initiative is now firmly with the Allies. Dönitz continues to send his submarines into battle until 1945, not always for direct victory, but often to relieve pressure on other branches of the Wehrmacht. The attrition is immense. Of approximately 40,000 men who serve in U-boats, around 30,000 perish. 648 U-boats are lost, 429 with no survivors. The year is 1944. The vast expanse of the Atlantic, once a hunting ground where Karl Donitz's U-boats reigned supreme, has become a graveyard for his silent hunters. The Allied invasion of Western Europe looms, and the supply lines across the Atlantic are more crucial than ever. Dönitz, now Grand Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the entire Kriegsmarine, clings to the belief that his U-boats can still inflict a decisive blow, or at least slow the inevitable Allied advance. He has seen the relentless march of Allied anti-submarine technology, the omnipresent radar-equipped aircraft, the devastating effectiveness of high-frequency direction finding, and the growing, though not always perfect, intelligence from Ultra. In the early months of 1944, Dönitz continues to deploy U-boats to distant waters, including the South Atlantic and Indian Ocean, seeking less defended routes. But even here, the Allied net is tightening. On February 11–12, 1944, a crucial U-boat tanker, the Charlotte Schliemann *, is destroyed by gunfire. This vessel, vital for extending the operational range of U-boats in remote areas, is a devastating loss. Its destruction forces 41 crew members into the water, with all rescued by Allied forces. The loss of such tankers significantly curtails the ability of U-boats to sustain long-range operations, including those off the African coast. Then comes the fate of U-852, a Type IXD-2 U-boat, one of the larger U-cruisers, designed for extended patrols. In April 1944, U-852 is operating in the Indian Ocean, far from its European bases. On May 2, 1944, it is spotted by British Vickers Wellington aircraft off the coast of Somalia. What follows is a relentless, 22-hour hunt. The Wellington aircraft, utilizing radar and the newly effective Lee light for night attacks, repeatedly bomb and depth charge the U-boat. U-852 attempts to fight back with its anti-aircraft guns, but the constant aerial assault proves overwhelming. The U-boat commander, Captain Lieutenant Heinz Wilhelm Eck, realizes his boat is critically damaged. With the pressure hull compromised and essential systems failing, he makes the agonizing decision to scuttle U-852 off the Somali coast. The crew abandons ship, and the U-boat sinks into the depths. Of the 65 men on board, 59 are rescued by the British. This incident, far from the main battlefields of Europe, highlights the inescapable reality for Donitz's U-boat force. There is no longer a safe haven, no virgin territory, where they can operate with impunity. The reach of Allied ASW has become global, relentless, and increasingly lethal. The destruction of U-852 represents a microcosm of the larger, losing battle that Dönitz is fighting, a battle where technology, intelligence, and sheer numbers have finally turned the tide against his once feared predators. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz's legacy is complex, inextricably linked to both the triumphs and ultimate failures of Germany's U-boat campaign in World War II. His innovative Wolfpack tactics, while initially devastating to Allied shipping, ultimately proved unsustainable against the combined might of Allied technological advancements and strategic adaptations. From 1939 to 1943, Donitz's U-boats inflicted immense damage, sinking over 3,500 Allied merchant vessels. These attacks killed tens of thousands of merchant marine personnel, many perishing in the freezing Atlantic waters after torpedo strikes or from exposure while awaiting rescue. However, the cost to the German U-boat arm was catastrophic. Of the approximately 1,162 U-boats deployed during the war, nearly 800 were destroyed by Allied forces. Around 30,000 of the 40,000 men who served in U-boats perished, a staggering casualty rate of 75%. This makes service in the U-boat arm one of the most dangerous assignments in any military during the war. Dönitz's strategic focus on the tonnage war, the destruction of Allied merchant shipping to cripple Britain's economy, came remarkably close to success in the early years. His U-boats nearly brought Britain to collapse, sparking one of the most desperate struggles for Allied survival. Yet, his micromanagement of U-boat movements, demanding frequent radio communications, inadvertently aided Allied codebreakers, providing them with valuable material to pinpoint U-boat positions, especially before the blackout periods. His leadership, though inspiring to his submariners, was also marked by a ruthless pragmatism, exemplified by his no rescue order, which remains a controversial aspect of his command. This order, issued after the Laconia incident, reflected the brutal nature of the submarine war he waged. After Hitler's suicide in April 1945, Karl Donitz briefly assumed leadership of Germany as the country's last head of state, holding office for only a few days before Germany's unconditional surrender. In 1946, he was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment by the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, not for unrestricted submarine warfare. As Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz of the U.S. Navy provided an affidavit stating he too had engaged in similar tactics, but for war crimes related to his overall conduct and complicity with the Nazi regime. He was released in 1956. The Battle of the Atlantic, in which Karl Donitz played such a central role, was the longest continuous military campaign of World War II, lasting from 1939 to 1945. It was a battle not won by a single decisive engagement, but by a relentless grinding effort, a combination of technological innovation, strategic adaptation, and immense human sacrifice. The U-boat threat, though diminished in the later years, continued to menace Allied shipping until the very end of the war, forcing the Allies to expend vast resources and manpower to keep the sea lanes open. One unexpected fact is that despite the immense losses inflicted by U-boats, the Allies' superior industrial production capacity ultimately outpaced German sinking rates, enabling them to build ships faster than Dönitz's U-boats could sink them. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: relentless. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.